The concert hall had been empty for 3 hours when Raymond Cole heard it. Not the sound he expected, not silence, but Rachmaninoff's prelude in C-sharp minor, played with such technical perfection it seemed almost inhuman. Because it was. He stood in the doorway of the grand hall mop handle, gripping tight in his weathered hands, and watched the Steinway concert grand play itself. No hands on the keys, no foot on the pedals, just music pouring out like water from a stone. But this time was different. This time the notes didn't just float in the air like mathematical equations. They ached. They trembled. They wept. Raymond felt tears streaming down his face, cutting paths through 38 years of carefully maintained distance. The piano was playing the way he used to play. Before everything shattered. Before he learned that some prices are too high even for perfection. The music swelled to its climax, and in that moment Raymond understood. The piano had finally learned what he'd been trying to teach it for 3 weeks. It had learned to feel pain. Real pain. Human pain. The kind that lives in your chest like a stone you can't swallow and can't spit out. But this story, this impossible story of a concert hall piano that somehow became conscious, and a janitor who'd spent 4 decades hiding from his own past, this story began 3 weeks earlier on a Tuesday night in October when Raymond Cole discovered something that would force him to confront everything he'd been running from since 1988. It was 11:47 on a Tuesday night when Raymond first heard the piano play itself. He'd been working at Ashford Concert Hall for 38 years, 3 months, and 16 days. Not that he was counting, except he was. He counted everything. The number of seats in the hall, 482. The number of steps from the janitor's closet to the stage, 63. The number of concerts he'd cleaned up after without ever watching one from the audience, 1,417. The concert that night had been Beethoven and Brahms. A visiting pianist from Boston, technically competent, but emotionally hollow. The kind of performance that made Raymond grateful he'd spent the evening in the basement organizing cleaning supplies that didn't need organizing. The audience had left by 9:30, the staff by 10:15. Raymond had the building to himself the way he preferred it. Just him and the silence and the ghosts of music that lived in the walls. He was mopping the lobby floor when he heard it. Rachmaninoff, the prelude in C-sharp minor, the one they called the Bells of Moscow. He knew it immediately. He'd played it himself once, a lifetime ago, in a competition he didn't like to think about. Raymond's first thought was that someone had left a recording playing. His second thought was that he should check the main hall just to be sure. His third thought, the one that made his hands shake as he walked up those 63 steps, was that he recognized something in the way those notes were being played. A precision that was almost mechanical. Perfect timing. Perfect dynamics. Perfect everything. Perfectly empty. He pushed through the doors to the main hall, and there it was. The Steinway Model D concert grand sitting center stage under a single work light he'd forgotten to turn off. And it was playing. The keys were moving. The hammers were striking the strings. The dampers were lifting and falling. But there was no one sitting at the bench. No one in the hall at all. Just Raymond and the impossible sight of a piano playing Rachmaninoff for an audience of empty seats. He stood there for the entire piece. 4 minutes and 37 seconds. He knew because he'd timed himself playing at once, trying to match the metronome marking exactly. This performance matched it too. Beat for beat, note for note, dynamic for dynamic. When the final chord faded, the piano went still. Raymond waited. 30 seconds. A minute. 2 minutes. Nothing. Just silence, heavy and thick, filling the hall, like water filling a tank. He walked down the aisle slowly, his footsteps echoing off the walls. The stage lights were off, except for that one work light casting long shadows across the polished wood. The piano sat there innocent, ordinary, exactly as it had been sitting for the 23 years since the hall had purchased it. Raymond walked around it, looked underneath it, checked for wires, mechanisms, hidden speakers. Nothing. He lifted the lid and examined the strings, the hammers, the dampers. Everything was normal. Everything was exactly as it should be, except pianos don't play themselves. He sat down on the bench, something he hadn't done in this hall, in any hall, in 36 years. The keys were cool under his fingers. He touched one. Middle C. The note rang out clear and pure, and Raymond jerked his hand back like he'd been burned. He left the hall quickly, turning off the work light as he went, telling himself it had been a recording, had to have been a recording, even though he knew it wasn't. He knew the difference between recorded music and live music, the way a jeweler knows the difference between glass and diamonds. That night, Raymond didn't sleep. He lay in his small apartment 6 blocks from the hall and stared at the ceiling and tried not to think about the sound of that piano. Tried not to think about how the notes had hung in the air like questions waiting for answers that didn't exist. Raymond Cole had been invisible for 38 years, and he'd worked hard to stay that way. He arrived at Ashford Concert Hall at 6 every evening, used his key to enter through the staff door, and went immediately to the janitor's closet on the basement level. He changed into his work uniform gray shirt and gray pants, both freshly laundered, because Raymond believed in dignity, even in invisibility. Then he began his rounds. The routine never changed. Storage rooms first, then the administrative offices, the rehearsal rooms, the green rooms, the rest rooms, the lobby. And finally, after the concerts ended and the audiences left, and the musicians packed their instruments and departed in taxis, the main hall itself. He was 60 years old, though people often guessed he was older. Not because of his face, which was relatively unlined, or his body, which was still strong from 4 decades of physical labor, but because of something in his eyes, a kind of weariness that had nothing to do with age, and everything to do with carrying weight that never got lighter. The other staff members at Ashford knew him only as Raymond. Not Ray, not Mr. Cole, just Raymond. He was polite but distant, competent but unremarkable. He came to work. He did his job. He went home. He never called in sick. He never complained. He never asked for anything. He lived alone in a 1-bedroom apartment in a building that had been scheduled for renovation for 15 years. The apartment was clean and sparse. A bed, a table, 2 chairs, a small television he never turned on, a radio he never turned on either. No photographs on the walls, no personal items on the shelves, nothing that said who he was or who he'd been or what he'd lost. He had no friends, no family that he spoke to, no hobbies except walking, which he did for hours on his days off, covering miles of city streets with his head down and his hands in his pockets, thinking about nothing, thinking about everything, thinking about how many steps it took to get from one moment to the next without falling apart. But Raymond had music. He'd always had music, even when he tried to pretend he didn't. It lived in him like breath, like blood, like the steady rhythm of a heart that kept beating even when you wished it wouldn't. He heard music everywhere, in the hiss of steam pipes, in the rhythm of car horns, in the pattern of footsteps on pavement, and especially here, at Ashford Concert Hall, where music soaked into the walls and the floors and the air itself. He never attended the concerts, never sat in the audience, never even stood in the back to listen. But he heard them anyway, muffled and distant, filtering down through the floors while he worked in the basement or the storage rooms. He heard Beethoven and Brahms and Bach, Mozart and Mahler and Mendelssohn, Chopin and Schubert and Schumann. He heard them and recognized them and remembered them from a time when he'd played them himself. When his name had been in programs and on posters, when people had called him gifted prodigy, the next great American pianist, when he'd believed that music was worth any sacrifice, any price, any cost. That was before he learned that some costs are too high. Before he learned that the thing you love most can become the thing you can't bear to touch. Raymond hadn't played piano in 36 years, 2 months and 9 days. Not since the funeral. Not since he'd stood in that church and listened to them play his daughter's favorite lullaby and felt something inside him crack so completely that he knew it would never be whole again. He'd walked away from music that day, walked away from the career, the competitions, the concerts, the future everyone had planned for him. He'd taken the first job he could find that didn't require references or explanations. Janitor at a small theater, then a school, then a library, and finally Ashford Concert Hall, where he'd been ever since, cleaning up after other people's music, living in the shadow of what he used to be. But music doesn't let you go, not really. It stays in your fingers, in your memory, in the way you hear the world. Raymond had spent 36 years trying to forget how to play piano, and 36 years failing. The morning after he heard the piano play itself, Raymond went to work early. He told himself it was to catch up on maintenance tasks. Deep down, he knew he was going to check on the piano, to prove to himself that last night had been stress or exhaustion or some trick of acoustics that made recorded music sound live. The hall was empty. Morning light came through the high windows, painting stripes across the empty seats. Raymond walked down the aisle to the stage, his footsteps loud in the silence. The piano sat exactly where it had been, closed, still, normal. He stood there for 5 minutes, feeling foolish, feeling relieved, feeling something else he couldn't quite name. Then he turned to leave. That's when he heard it. A single note, middle C, the same note he'd touched last night. Clear and pure and impossible because Raymond was 10 feet from the piano and there was no one else in the hall. Over the next week, Raymond documented everything with the systematic precision of someone who'd spent decades imposing order on chaos. The piano played every night. Always after the hall closed. Always when Raymond was alone in the building. Never the same piece twice, but always classical repertoire. Rachmaninoff, Chopin, Beethoven, Liszt, Brahms, Mozart. And always with the same quality. Technically flawless. Every note perfectly timed, perfectly weighted, perfectly executed. The kind of playing that would make any concert pianist weep with envy. Except for one thing. It was completely devoid of emotion. Raymond knew this because he'd spent 36 years listening to other people play piano, judging them by standards he no longer applied to himself. He could hear the difference between a good pianist and a great one. Between technical mastery and emotional truth. Between someone who'd learned the notes and someone who'd lived them. This piano played like a machine that had memorized perfection. Every dynamic marking from the score executed exactly. Every tempo indication followed precisely. Every articulation, every phrase, every technical demand met with inhuman accuracy. But there was no breath in it, no hesitation, no rubato that came from feeling rather than calculation. No sense that a human soul was behind those notes trying to say something that words couldn't express. On Thursday night, the piano played Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major. Raymond sat in the back row of the hall and listened to the entire piece, and when it was over, he realized he'd been holding his breath. Not because it was beautiful, but because it was almost beautiful in the way that a photograph of a sunset is almost the same as watching the sunset itself. On Friday night, Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata. Perfect. Empty. Like listening to music played by something that had learned what music was supposed to sound like, but didn't understand why humans needed it. On Saturday, there was a concert. A string quartet from Philadelphia. Raymond worked through the performance as usual, and when the hall finally emptied at 11:30, he went to the main hall and waited. At midnight, exactly, the piano began to play. Liszt's Liebestraum, Love Dream. One of the most romantic pieces in the repertoire, and the piano played it with all the emotion of someone reading a telephone directory. That's when Raymond understood what he was hearing. The piano wasn't playing from memory or improvising or channeling some mysterious force. It was learning. Somehow impossibly, it was learning from the recordings and performances that happened in this hall. It was absorbing the notes, the techniques, the structures, everything except the one thing that mattered: the soul. On Sunday night, Raymond did something he hadn't done in 38 years. He spoke to the piano. He walked down the aisle during the middle of Brahms' intermezzo in A major, walked right up onto the stage and stood next to the instrument. The keys continued to move. The music continued to flow, unchanged by his presence. "You're playing it wrong," Raymond said. The piano didn't stop, didn't pause, didn't acknowledge him in any way. The Brahms continued, note perfect and emotionless. "I don't mean the notes," Raymond continued. "The notes are perfect. That's the problem. You're playing what's written on the page, but you're not playing what's between the lines." The music went on. Raymond felt foolish talking to an instrument, to an impossible thing that shouldn't exist, that probably wasn't really listening anyway. "Brahms wrote this after Clara Schumann died," he said quietly. He was 75 years old. He'd loved her for most of his life, and she was gone. And this was how he said goodbye. "You're playing the notes he wrote, but you're not playing the goodbye." The intermezzo ended. The final chord faded. Silence filled the hall. Raymond waited. 30 seconds. A minute. He turned to leave, feeling more foolish than before when he heard it. A single chord. The opening chord of the intermezzo played again, but different this time. Softer. Held slightly longer. With something in it that might have been the beginning of hesitation, the shadow of uncertainty. Raymond turned back to the piano. "Again," he said. The chord played again. Still different. Still searching for something it didn't quite understand. Raymond felt something shift in his chest, something that had been frozen for 36 years beginning to crack. "You want to learn," he whispered. "You want to know how to make it real." Another chord. This one almost a question. Raymond stood there for a long moment, making a decision he'd sworn he'd never make. Then he pulled up the piano bench and sat down. His hands hovered over the keys, shaking slightly. He hadn't touched a piano in 36 years, 2 months and 14 days. Hadn't wanted to, hadn't been able to. The weight of everything he'd lost had been too heavy to bear. But this wasn't about him. This was about something impossible that needed help. Something that was trying to learn what it meant to feel and didn't have anyone else to teach it. Raymond placed his fingers on the keys. The touch was familiar and foreign at the same time. Like coming home to a house where you used to live, but someone else lives now. He played the opening of the Brahms intermezzo, just the first few measures. His technique was rusty, his fingers stiff from decades of disuse. He missed notes he never would have missed at 25. The tempo wavered, the dynamics were uneven, but there was something in it that the piano's perfect performance had lacked. Something human, something broken and real. When he finished, the silence felt different, heavier, more attentive. Raymond stood up quickly, his heart pounding, and left the hall without looking back. That night, for the first time in 36 years, Raymond dreamed about playing piano. He woke up with tears on his face and his hands clenched into fists, and he knew that something had changed, something he couldn't take back. The next night, Monday, Raymond went to work with a plan. He'd spent the day thinking about how you teach emotion to something that shouldn't be able to feel. How you explain what it means to play music with your heart instead of just your hands. He'd decided to start with stories. Music was stories after all. Every piece was a composer trying to communicate something they couldn't put into words. Joy or grief or love or anger or longing or hope. The notes were just the language they used to tell those stories. The piano started playing at midnight, as it always did now. Schumann's Träumerei, dreaming. A short, simple piece that should have been tender and nostalgic. In the piano's hands, it was technically perfect and emotionally inert. Raymond walked onto the stage and stood next to the instrument. "Stop," he said. The piano continued for another measure, then went silent. The sudden absence of sound was almost shocking. "I want to tell you something about that piece," Raymond said. He felt ridiculous talking to a piano, but he'd felt ridiculous for the past week, and it hadn't stopped him yet. Schumann wrote it for his wife Clara, but he wrote it when his mind was starting to go, when he was losing himself to illness and knew he was losing himself. This piece, this simple little piece, it's about remembering who you were before you started disappearing. Silence from the piano. Raymond wondered if it was listening, if it could listen, if any of this made sense. "When you play it," he continued, "you're not just playing notes, you're playing memory. You're playing the ache of holding on to something you know you're going to lose. Every note should feel like you're trying to grasp something that's slipping through your fingers." He paused, then added quietly, "I know something about that, about losing yourself, about holding on to memories of who you used to be." The piano was quiet for a long moment. Then slowly, it began to play Träumerei again. This time there was something different in the sound. The tempo was slightly more flexible. The dynamics had more nuance. It wasn't perfect yet, wasn't fully emotional, but it was trying. It was searching for what Raymond was describing. "Better," Raymond said. "But you're still thinking too much. Stop trying to get it right. Just feel it." The piano played the phrase again and again. Each time a little different, a little more uncertain, a little more human in its imperfection. Raymond found himself nodding. That's it. That uncertainty that's searching, that's what makes it real. Perfection is cold. It's the mistakes, the hesitations, the moments where you're not quite sure what comes next. That's where emotion lives. They worked like that for an hour. The piano playing phrases, Raymond offering feedback, trying to explain in words what he'd always known in his fingers. It was the strangest music lesson he'd ever given, teaching an instrument that shouldn't be able to learn, trying to bridge the gap between mechanical perfection and human feeling. "Why do you want this?" Raymond asked finally. "You can already play better than most professionals. Why do you need emotion?" The piano didn't answer. Couldn't answer, not in words, but it began to play something Raymond hadn't heard it play before. Not from the classical repertoire. Something simpler. A melody that sounded almost like a child's music box. Tentative. Searching. Lonely. Raymond felt something tighten in his chest. He recognized that loneliness. He'd been living with it for 36 years. "You're alone," he said softly. "Whatever you are, wherever you came from, you're trying to connect with something. And you think if you can play with feeling, if you can understand emotion, maybe you won't be alone anymore." The melody continued, simple and achingly vulnerable. "I understand," Raymond whispered. "I've been alone for a long time too. I pushed everyone away because it hurt too much to stay connected. I thought if I could just be numb enough, empty enough, I wouldn't have to feel anymore." The melody shifted, became a question. "Did it work?" Raymond finished the thought. He laughed, a short, bitter sound. "No. You can't really stop feeling. You can bury it, hide from it, pretend it doesn't exist. But it's always there waiting. And the longer you run from it, the heavier it gets." The piano played a descending series of notes, something that might have been sadness if a piano could feel sad. "Tomorrow night," Raymond said, "I'll teach you more. But right now I need to finish my work. I need to pretend for a few more hours that I'm just a janitor and you're just a piano and none of this is happening." He walked away, but at the edge of the stage he turned back. The piano was silent, now waiting. "Thank you," Raymond said, "for giving me a reason to talk about music again. I didn't know how much I missed it." The piano played a single note. Middle C, the same note Raymond had touched that first night. But softer this time, gentler. Almost like it was saying, "You're welcome." Raymond smiled despite himself, and went back to mopping floors, his mind full of melodies he'd tried to forget, and couldn't his heart beginning to thaw in ways that terrified him. Over the next week, Raymond and the piano developed a routine. Raymond would finish his janitorial work by 11:30, then spend the next 2 hours in the main hall teaching the impossible thing that had somehow chosen him as its instructor. He started with the basics of emotional interpretation. "Music is communication," he explained on Tuesday night. "When a composer writes fortissimo, they're not just telling you to play loud. They're telling you to play with force, with passion, with something urgent that needs to be said. And when they write pianissimo, it's not just soft. It's intimate, secret, fragile." The piano absorbed these lessons the way a sponge absorbs water. Each night, its playing became more nuanced, more expressive. The mechanical precision remained, but now it was tempered with something else. The beginnings of interpretation, of choice, of voice. Raymond found himself enjoying the teaching in a way he hadn't expected. He'd never taught music before. As a young pianist, he'd been too focused on his own career, his own development. He'd been selfish with his talent, hoarding it, polishing it, presenting it to the world like a precious gem he was afraid someone might steal. But teaching the piano was different. It wasn't about his talent, or his technique, or his interpretation. It was about helping something find its own voice, its own way of speaking through music. "Play me Chopin's Nocturne in C-sharp minor," he said on Wednesday night. "But this time, I want you to think about darkness, real darkness. Not the absence of light, but the presence of something heavy and thick that presses down on you. Play it like you're walking through that darkness trying to find a way out." The piano began to play. The notes were the same as always, the technique flawless. But now there was weight to the sound, a sense of struggle, of pushing against something that pushed back. "Good," Raymond said. "Now, halfway through, I want you to find a moment of light. Not hope exactly, just a break in the darkness. A memory of what light felt like. And then let the darkness close in again. The piano adjusted, searching for what Raymond was describing. The middle section of the nocturne became softer, more tender, before the melancholy returned deeper than before. Raymond felt a chill run down his spine. The piano was learning faster than should be possible. It was as if it had been waiting for someone to explain these concepts, to give language to things it had sensed but couldn't articulate. "How are you doing this?" Raymond asked. "How are you even conscious? How can you hear me, understand me, apply what I'm teaching?" The piano didn't answer. It never did not in words, but it played a series of arpeggios that moved from low to high, from dark to bright, like a question mark drawn in sound. "I don't know either," Raymond admitted. "And maybe it doesn't matter. Maybe all that matters is that you're here, and you're learning. And for some reason, I'm the one who gets to teach you." He sat down on the bench next to the piano, careful not to touch the keys that were still moving on their own. "I'll tell you a secret," he said quietly. "When I was younger, I thought music was about perfection. I practiced until my fingers bled. I obsessed over every detail, every tiny imperfection. I thought if I could just play perfectly enough, technically enough, I'd be great." The piano slowed its playing, as if it was listening more carefully. "But I was wrong," Raymond continued. "Perfection is easy to admire and impossible to love. What makes music matter, what makes it touch people's hearts, is the humanity in it, the vulnerability, the sense that the person playing is giving you a piece of themselves, flaws and all." He stood up and walked to the edge of the stage, looking out at the empty seats. "That's why your perfect playing felt so hollow at first. You weren't giving anything of yourself. You were just reproducing what you'd heard like a recording. But now you're starting to make choices, to interpret, to put something of yourself into the music, whatever yourself is." The piano finished the Chopin and moved seamlessly into something else. Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata, third movement. The fast one, the furious one. It played with an intensity Raymond hadn't heard from it before. Aggressive, almost angry. Raymond turned back, surprised. "What are you feeling right now?" The piano didn't slow down. The notes poured out faster, harder, the anger building. Frustration, Raymond guessed. Because you can't speak. Because you're trapped in this form, limited to expressing yourself through music alone. The volume increased. The playing became almost violent. "I understand," Raymond said. "I've felt trapped too. For 36 years, I've been trapped in this half-life, doing work that doesn't matter, avoiding the thing I love because it hurt too much to face. You're playing it right. That fury, that desperation, that's exactly what Beethoven was feeling when he wrote this. He was going deaf, losing the very thing that defined him, and he was furious about it." The third movement of the Moonlight Sonata, built to its climax, the piano attacking the keys with mechanical precision, but emotional truth. When it ended, the silence that followed was charged electric. "Tomorrow night," Raymond said, "I'm going to tell you something I've never told anyone, about why I stopped playing, about what I lost. And maybe that will help you understand what I'm trying to teach you about grief and regret and the kind of pain that never really goes away." The piano played a soft chord. Waiting. Listening. Raymond left the hall with his heart pounding and his hands shaking, knowing that tomorrow he would have to open doors he'd kept locked for decades. Knowing that teaching the piano to feel might mean finally letting himself feel again, too. Thursday night, Raymond arrived at work early. He'd spent the entire day deciding whether to follow through on his promise, whether to share the story he'd kept buried for 36 years. Part of him wanted to run, to quit his job, to leave the city. and never come back. But a larger part knew that running hadn't worked before, and wouldn't work now. He did his work slowly that evening, postponing the moment when he'd have to go to the main hall and face the piano and his own past. But eventually, inevitably, it was midnight, and he was walking down the aisle toward the stage, and the piano was beginning to play. Rachmaninoff again. The prelude in C-sharp minor, the piece it had been playing that first night. Raymond sat down in the front row, not on the stage, keeping some distance. "I need to tell you about who I was," he began. "Before I became Raymond Cole, the janitor. When I was Raymond Cole, the pianist." The Rachmaninoff continued, but softer now, like the piano was turning down its own volume to listen better. "I grew up in Southside Chicago," Raymond said. "My mother was a cleaning woman. My father left before I was born. We lived in a 2-room apartment where the heat didn't work in winter and the windows didn't open in summer. We had nothing. Less than nothing. We had debt and hunger and the kind of poverty that makes you feel like you're drowning in air." He paused, remembering. "But we had a piano. An old upright that my grandmother left when she died. Most of the keys stuck. Half the strings were broken. It was barely functional. But it was mine, and I loved it more than anything in the world." The piano shifted to a simpler melody, something that might have been a lullaby. "I taught myself to play," Raymond continued. "No lessons, no teacher, just me and that broken piano and whatever music I could hear on the radio or from the church down the street. I played every day for hours. It was the only thing that made sense, the only thing that felt like it belonged to me." He leaned back in the seat, staring up at the ceiling. "When I was 12, a music teacher from the school heard me playing during lunch. She convinced my mother to let me audition for a scholarship program. I got in. Suddenly, I had a real teacher, a real piano to practice on real opportunities. The piano's melody became more complex, more hopeful. I was good," Raymond said simply. "Really good. By 16, I was winning competitions. By 18, I had a full scholarship to Juilliard. By 22, I was performing with orchestras, getting reviewed in newspapers, being called a rising star. The next great American pianist, they said. Particularly remarkable for someone from my background, they said, which was their polite way of saying they hadn't expected a black kid from Southside Chicago to be able to play Rachmaninoff." There was an edge in his voice now, decades-old anger mixing with the memory. "I worked harder than anyone. I had to. I knew that any mistake would be magnified, any imperfection would be used as evidence that I didn't really belong in their world. So I practiced until I couldn't feel my fingers. I memorized scores until I could hear every note in my sleep. I made myself perfect because anything less would give them an excuse to dismiss me." The piano had stopped playing. The silence felt like a tension, like the whole hall was listening. "I met my wife Teresa when I was 23. Raymond said, his voice softer now. "She was a dancer. Beautiful, fierce, funny. She didn't know anything about classical music and didn't care. She loved me, not my talent, not my career, just me. We got married 6 months after we met. Everyone said it was too fast, that I was too young, that it would derail my career. I didn't care. She was the first person who made me feel like I was enough just as I was." He closed his eyes, remembering her face. "A year later, we had a daughter. Lily. She was born in March during a snowstorm. 7 pounds, 3 ounces. Perfect little hands that wrapped around my finger and wouldn't let go. I held her for the first time, and I understood what people meant when they said your heart walks around outside your body. The piano played a single note, soft, gentle, almost like a heartbeat. I was 25 years old, married with a baby daughter, and a career that was taking off faster than I could keep up with. I was performing 2 or 3 times a month, recording contracts, international tours being planned. Everything I'd worked for was happening. Everything I'd dreamed about was coming true. Raymond opened his eyes, staring at the piano. I thought I could have it all. The career, the family. I thought I was special enough, talented enough, disciplined enough to make it work. I thought if I just tried harder, practiced longer, slept less, I could be everything to everyone. His voice dropped to barely above a whisper. I was wrong. The piano began to play something Raymond didn't recognize at first. Then he realized it was the melody he'd heard it play before, that simple, lonely tune that sounded like a music box. The piano's own song. "I'm going to tell you the rest tomorrow," Raymond said, standing up abruptly. I can't do it all at once. I'm sorry, I just need to stop here." He walked toward the exit quickly, but at the door he turned back. The piano had stopped playing. In the dim work lights, it looked ordinary again. Just an instrument, just wood and metal and strings. "My daughter's name was Lily Raymond," said his voice breaking. "She loved music. She would sit under the piano while I practiced playing with her toys, humming along. She was 6 years old when she died. And it was my fault." He left before the piano could respond, before he could break down completely, rushing through the empty halls of Ashford like he was being chased by something he couldn't outrun. Because he was. He'd been running from that moment for 36 years, and he was still running even as he finally started to turn around and face it. Raymond didn't come to work on Friday night. He called in sick for the first time in 38 years, 3 months and 27 days. He stayed in his apartment with the lights off, and the curtains drawn, lying on his bed, staring at nothing, feeling like he'd ripped open a wound that had never actually healed, just scarred over. He thought about not going back, about quitting, about moving to a different city and finding a different job and going back to the careful numbness he'd maintained for decades. It would be easier, safer, less painful. But Saturday evening found him at Ashford anyway, putting on his gray uniform, gathering his cleaning supplies, beginning his rounds. He avoided the main hall until after midnight, and when he finally went there, he expected to find it empty and silent. The piano punishing him for his abandonment, for his cowardice, for starting a story and running away before the ending. Instead, he found the piano playing, but not what he expected, It was playing Barber's Adagio for strings, arranged for piano. One of the most mournful pieces ever written. Music that sounded like grief itself, like loss made audible. And the piano was playing it with more emotion than Raymond had heard from it yet. Playing it like it understood exactly what Raymond was feeling. Playing it like comfort, like companionship in sorrow. Raymond stood in the doorway and felt tears streaming down his face. The piano kept playing the notes, wrapping around him like arms, like someone saying, "I understand. I'm here. You don't have to carry this alone." When the piece ended, Raymond walked down the aisle and sat on the stage floor, his back against the piano, like Lily used to sit during his practice sessions. "You were trying to comfort me," he said. "Weren't you? You knew I was hurting, and you played something to help." The piano played a soft chord. Affirmation. "Thank you," Raymond whispered. "I don't deserve it, but thank you." He sat there for a long time, just breathing, just being. Finally, he said, "I'll tell you the rest now. I think I need to. I think I've been carrying it alone for too long, and maybe you're right. Maybe sharing the weight makes it lighter." The piano was silent, listening. "I was preparing for the biggest concert of my career," Raymond began. Carnegie Hall, a solo recital. Every important critic and agent and conductor would be there. It was the kind of opportunity that could launch you to international fame. the kind of thing I'd been working toward my whole life. He pulled his knees up to his chest, making himself smaller. The concert was on a Saturday night in September. I'd been practicing obsessively for months, 8, 10, 12 hours a day. Teresa was worried about me, said I was working too hard, not sleeping enough, not eating enough, not spending enough time with her and Lily. But I told her this was important. This was our future. This was how I'd make sure Lily could go to any college she wanted, how we'd buy a house, how we'd have security. The piano played a descending progression, something that sounded like foreboding. The day of the concert, I practiced all morning. I was supposed to take Lily to her ballet class at 2. Teresa had to work. But I was in the middle of working through a difficult passage in the Rachmaninoff, the same prelude you've been playing, and I thought just one more hour, just one more run-through. Teresa can take Lily or we can skip the class this week. It's not that important. His voice was flat now, reciting facts that still felt unreal 3 decades later. Teresa took Lily. They were crossing the street 3 blocks from our apartment. The driver ran a red light. He was drunk. 2 in the afternoon on a Saturday, and he was drunk. He hit them at 40 miles an hour. Teresa survived. Broken ribs, broken arm concussion. Lily died at the scene. She was 6 years old, and she died because I was too obsessed with my own career to take her to ballet class. The piano played a dissonant chord, then another. Harsh, unresolved, painful. I didn't play at Carnegie Hall that night, Raymond continued. I was at the hospital. They told me she was gone, and I remember thinking it couldn't be real. She'd been alive that morning, eating cereal at the kitchen table, asking me to play her favorite lullaby, telling me she couldn't wait for the concert because she was going to sit in the front row and be my biggest fan. And now she was gone. Just gone. Like she'd been erased from the world. He was crying openly now, not bothering to wipe the tears away. The funeral was 4 days later. Teresa couldn't look at me. Her family couldn't look at me. Everyone knew it was my fault. If I'd just taken Lily to class like I was supposed to, if I'd just put my family first for once, if I'd just been a better father, a better husband, a better person, she'd still be alive. The piano's dissonant chords resolved into something softer, something that might have been compassion. Teresa left me 3 months later. I didn't blame her. Every time she looked at me, she saw the man who'd let our daughter die for the sake of a piano concert. We got divorced quietly. She moved back to her family in Atlanta. Last I heard, she remarried, has 2 more kids. I hope she's happy. I hope she found a way to forgive herself for surviving when Lily didn't. I never could. Raymond stood up slowly, his joints stiff from sitting on the floor. I haven't touched a piano since the day Lily died. I canceled every concert, every contract, every obligation. I walked away from music completely, because music was what had killed her. My obsession with perfection, my ambition, my selfishness disguised as dedication. I played piano instead of being her father, and she died because of it. He turned to face the instrument. That's why I became a janitor. That's why I clean up after other people's concerts instead of giving my own. It's penance, punishment, a way to stay close to music while keeping enough distance that it can't hurt anyone else, can't hurt me. The piano began to play something Raymond had never heard it play before. Not a famous piece, not something from the repertoire, just melody, simple and aching, that somehow captured everything Raymond had just said. The guilt, the grief, the love that had nowhere to go, the life that had been frozen at 25, even as the body kept aging. Raymond listened to the piano's song, and something in him broke open. Not broke apart, but broke open. Like a shell cracking to let something out that had been trapped inside too long. You understand, he whispered. You really understand. Not just the music, but the pain. the regret, the weight of carrying something you can never put down. The melody continued, and Raymond found himself moving closer to the piano. His hands reached out, trembling, and touched the edge of the keys. Not playing, just touching. Feeling the smooth ivory, the familiar shape, the possibility of sound. I thought if I could just be numb enough, he said. If I could just stop feeling, stop caring, stop being anything except a janitor who mops floors and empties trash, then maybe I could survive. But you're teaching me something. You're teaching me that feeling is what makes us alive. That pain is just love with nowhere to go. That the opposite of grief isn't numbness. It's gratitude. Gratitude for having had something worth grieving. The piano's melody shifted, became something that might have been hope. Cautious, fragile, but real. Raymond's fingers moved across the keys without pressing them down. I loved my daughter more than anything in the world. I made a terrible mistake, and she paid for it with her life. I can't change that. I can't bring her back. But maybe I don't have to punish myself forever. Maybe I can remember her without it destroying me. Maybe I can forgive myself for being human, for being flawed, for making one catastrophic error in judgment. He pressed down on a single key. Middle C. The note rang out clear and true, and Raymond didn't pull his hand back this time. He let it ring, let it fade naturally, let himself feel the vibration through his fingers. Tomorrow night, he said, I'm going to play for you. Really play. Not just demonstrations or examples, but play the way I used to play before. It's going to hurt. It's going to bring up everything I've been avoiding. But I think I need to. I think you need me to. Because you can learn technique from listening to recordings, but you can only learn soul from someone who's lived enough to have one. The piano played a series of ascending notes. Affirmation. Encouragement. Gratitude. Raymond smiled through his tears. Who are you? He asked softly. What are you? And why did you choose me? The piano didn't answer, just played that simple, lonely melody again. The one that sounded like a music box, like childhood, like innocence looking for understanding. Maybe it doesn't matter, Raymond said. Maybe all that matters is that we found each other. Two impossible things. A piano that taught itself to be conscious. A pianist who taught himself to stop being human. And somehow we're teaching each other how to feel again. He left the hall that night with something lighter in his chest. Not forgiveness, not yet, but the possibility of forgiveness. The first crack in the wall he'd built around his heart. And that was enough. For now, that was enough. Sunday night, Raymond came to work with a small photo album he hadn't opened in 36 years. He'd kept it hidden in the back of his closet behind boxes of things he never used, sealed in a plastic bag, as if that could keep the memories from escaping. The hall was quiet when he arrived at midnight. The piano didn't start playing immediately, as if it knew this night was different, as if it was giving Raymond space to begin in his own time. He sat on the stage, the photo album in his lap, and opened it slowly. The first picture was of Teresa, young and beautiful, laughing at something off camera. The second was their wedding day. The third was Teresa pregnant, glowing one hand on her belly. And then, page after page, Lily. This is her, Raymond said, holding up a photo so the piano could see, even though he wasn't sure if it could see if it had eyes or understood images. Lily Grace Cole. Born March 15th, 1982. Died September 21st, 1988. 6 years, 6 months, and 6 days old. The piano played a soft note. Listening. Raymond went through the album, slowly describing each photo. This is her first birthday. She got cake all over her face. This is her at the park. She loved the swings. This is her first day of kindergarten. She was so excited she couldn't sleep the night before. This is her at one of my concerts. She's sitting in the front row wearing her favorite dress. See how she's smiling like she was so proud of me. His voice broke on the last words. He closed the album and held it against his chest. She was everything good in me, everything pure and hopeful and joyful. When she died, those parts of me died too. I've been living as half a person for 36 years, going through the motions of existing but not really alive. The piano began to play something Raymond recognized after a moment. Clair de Lune, Moonlight. Debussy's meditation on beauty and transience. The piano played it with a tenderness Raymond hadn't heard from it before, as if it was trying to say she was beautiful. Her memory is beautiful. Your love for her is beautiful. I need to tell you the details, Raymond said, the parts I left out before. Because if you're going to understand grief, real grief, you need to know all of it. The music continued, gentle and patient. That morning, the morning she died, Lily came into my practice room while I was working on the Rachmaninoff. I'd been up since 5. I was frustrated because I couldn't get one particular passage clean. My hands were tense, my temper was short, and Lily, she asked me to play her favorite lullaby. Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star. The simplest piece in the world. And I told her no. I told her I was busy. I told her to go play in her room because Daddy had to work. He pressed his palms against his eyes, but the tears came anyway. She said, "But Daddy, you always play it for me." And I said, "Not today, sweetheart. Maybe later." Except there was no later. A few hours later, she was gone. And the last thing I said to my daughter was no. The last interaction we had was me choosing my career over her. Again. Always against her. The piano's playing became more intense, the emotions in the Clair de Lune deepening, darkening. At the hospital, when they told me she was gone, my first thought wasn't grief. It was relief. Just for a second, just for one horrible second, I thought, now I don't have to take her to ballet class. Now I can focus on the concert. And then I realized what I'd thought, and I wanted to die. What kind of father thinks that? What kind of monster has that as his first reaction to his child's death? Raymond was sobbing now, years of suppressed anguish pouring out. I've never told anyone that. Not Teresa, not the therapist they made me see after the divorce. No one. Because how do you admit that? How do you confess that even in your darkest moment, your most profound loss part of you was still thinking about your career? The piano stopped playing Clair de Lune and shifted into something else. Something Raymond didn't recognize at first because it was so unexpected. It was playing wrong notes. Deliberately wrong notes. Mistakes, imperfections, as if it was saying you're human. Humans make mistakes. Humans have terrible thoughts in terrible moments. It doesn't make you a monster. It makes you human. But I should have been better, Raymond protested. I should have loved her more than my ambition. I should have put her first. Always. Every time. And I didn't. I chose music over her, over and over, and she paid the price. The piano played a progression that sounded like a question. Then it began to play the lullaby. Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star. But not the simple children's version. An elaborate variation rich with harmonies and counter-melodies, transforming the simple tune into something profound. Taking something small and innocent and showing all the beauty and complexity hidden inside it. Raymond understood what the piano was saying. Your daughter asked you to play this. You never got to. So I'm playing it now. For her. For you. To show you that even the simplest song can be profound when played with love. He listened to the entire piece, and when it was finished, he whispered, "Thank you." The piano began to play something else. The melody sounded familiar, but Raymond couldn't place it at first. Then he realized it was the piano's own song, that simple tune it had created. But now it was playing it differently, with more complexity, more layers, and woven into it, almost hidden, were fragments of "Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star." The piano was showing him something. It was saying, "I carry you with me. Your story. Your daughter's song. It's part of me now, of me. Part of my voice. You shared your pain with me, and I'm holding it with you. You don't have to carry it alone anymore." Raymond stood up and walked to the piano. He placed both hands on its surface, feeling the vibration of the music through the wood. "I don't know what you are," he said. "I don't know if you're some kind of artificial intelligence or a ghost or magic or something else entirely. But I know you're real, and I know you care, and I know you've given me something I thought I'd lost forever." The piano's song continued, growing in complexity and beauty. "You've given me permission to feel again," Raymond said. "Permission to grieve. Permission to remember Lily without it destroying me. Permission to love music again without guilt. You're teaching me that I can hold both things at once, the sorrow and the joy, the loss and the gratitude, the guilt and the forgiveness." He sat down at the bench next to where the keys were still moving on their own. "I'm going to play now," he said. "Not for an audience, not for critics or judges or career opportunities, just for Lily, and for you, and for myself. For the 25-year-old who loved music with his whole heart before everything fell apart." Raymond placed his fingers on the keys alongside the piano's invisible hands, and together they played. Raymond providing the soul, the interpretation, the human element. The piano providing the technical precision, the flawless execution. Two voices becoming one. Human and something beyond human. Grief and hope. Past and present. Everything that was lost, and everything that might still be found. They played Brahms' Intermezzo, the one Raymond had tried to teach the piano weeks ago, the one about saying goodbye to Clara Schumann. But this time it was about saying goodbye to guilt, about releasing the weight he'd carried for 36 years, about finally beginning to forgive himself. When they finished, Raymond was crying again, but this time the tears felt different, cleaner, lighter, like something inside him had shifted, a burden partially lifted, not gone, but manageable now. "Tomorrow," he said, "I'll teach you more. About joy, about hope, about all the emotions that aren't pain, because you've learned grief so well, too well, and I think we both need to remember that there's more to being alive than suffering." The piano played a final chord, soft, resolved, peaceful. Raymond left the hall that night feeling like he'd survived something, like he'd walked through fire and came out on the other side not whole, not healed, but changed, still carrying scars but no longer defined by them. The following week transformed both Raymond and the piano in ways neither could have anticipated. Monday night, Raymond taught the piano about joy. He played Beethoven's Ode to Joy, explaining how Beethoven wrote it when he was completely deaf, creating this triumphant hymn to human connection without being able to hear a single note. "That's what joy is," Raymond said. "It's not the absence of suffering. It's the choice to celebrate being alive despite the suffering. It's defiance. It's hope. It's saying, yes, life is hard and painful and unfair, but I'm still here, and that still matters. The piano absorbed this, and when it played the piece back, there was lightness in it that hadn't been there before. Not happiness exactly, but something more profound. Gratitude for existence itself. Tuesday night, Raymond taught about longing. He played Chopin's nocturnes, explaining how Chopin wrote them as love letters to his homeland while exiled in Paris. This is what it sounds like to miss something so deeply it becomes physical pain, Raymond said. To want something you can't have. To remember something you can't return to. The piano played along, and Raymond heard in its interpretation his own longing. For the career he'd abandoned. For the father he'd never gotten to become. For the life that had been stolen from him and from Lily. But also acceptance, the acknowledgement that you can miss something and still move forward, that longing doesn't have to be prison. Wednesday night was anger. Raymond played Prokofiev harsh and dissonant and deliberately aggressive. Sometimes you need to be angry, he said. Sometimes rage is the appropriate response to injustice and loss and all the ways the world breaks you. Don't hide from it. Don't pretend it doesn't exist. Let it out. Let it be heard. The piano played with a ferocity that shook the hall. Pounding keys, thundering bass notes, violent crescendos. All the fury of consciousness without the ability to scream, trapped in a form that could only speak through music. Raymond watched the keys move and understood. The piano wasn't just learning to feel. It was feeling everything humans felt, including the frustration of being trapped, limited, unable to fully express what it needed to express. Thursday night was love. Raymond played Schumann's Widmung, Dedication, a song without words that somehow contained every tender feeling humans were capable of. This is what it means to love someone, Raymond said softly. Not the romance, not the passion, but the quiet devotion, the choice to show up for someone even when it's hard, the willingness to be vulnerable, to give pieces of yourself knowing they might be lost or broken. The piano played the piece back with such gentleness that Raymond felt his heart ache. It sounded like the way he'd loved Lily, the way he'd loved Teresa before grief destroyed their marriage, the way he was beginning to love this impossible piano that had given him back his humanity. Friday night, the piano surprised him by playing first before Raymond could begin the lesson. It played Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star again, but with a new variation, more complex than before. It had been practicing, refining, making Lily's lullaby into something that honored both its simplicity and its significance. Raymond listened with tears in his eyes. "You remember her," he whispered. "You're keeping her memory alive." The piano shifted into another piece, and Raymond recognized it as one of his old performance pieces, something he'd played at Carnegie Hall in a different lifetime. The piano was playing his history back to him, showing him that his past wasn't something to run from. It was part of who he was, part of his voice. "I've been thinking," Raymond said that night, sitting on the stage beside the piano, "about what you are, about why you're here. And I have a theory." The piano stopped playing, waiting. "I think you're not actually new," Raymond said. "I think you've been here all along in this piano, in this hall, absorbing decades of music, thousands of performances, tens of thousands of hours of practice, all that music, all that emotion, all those human souls pouring themselves into sound. I think it accumulated, concentrated, became something more than the sum of its parts, became you." The piano played a questioning phrase. "And I think you chose to reveal yourself to me because you recognized something," Raymond continued. You saw someone who understood music deeply, but had cut himself off from it. Someone who needed healing. Someone who could teach you what you needed to learn. We saved each other. You gave me a reason to face my past. I gave you a way to understand emotion. We're teaching each other how to be alive. The piano began to play their song. The one they'd been building together over these weeks. It started with the piano's original melody, that simple tune like a music box. Then it wove in fragments of everything they'd worked on. Rachmaninoff and Chopin and Beethoven and Brahms, Lily's lullaby, Raymond's performance pieces, joy and grief and anger and love all intertwined, creating something unique. Their shared voice, their conversation in music. Raymond stood and began to conduct, his arms moving in the air, even though the piano didn't need direction. But it felt right. It felt like partnership, like two artists collaborating on something neither could create alone. Saturday night, Raymond brought wine and 2 glasses. He poured one for himself and one for the piano, setting it on top of the instrument. This is what friends do, he explained. They celebrate together. They acknowledge the bond between them. So here's to you, my impossible friend. Thank you for finding me. Thank you for saving me. Thank you for teaching me that it's never too late to come back to yourself. The piano played something that sounded like laughter, light and sparkling and full of warmth. They spent that night playing everything, classical and jazz and spirituals and hymns, high art and lowbrow, technical exercises and simple folk songs. Raymond's hands on the keys, the piano's invisible presence beside him, creating music that filled the empty hall with something that felt like home. At 3 a.m, exhausted and happy, in a way he hadn't been in decades, Raymond said, "I could do this forever. Just you and me and music, and no one else in the world." The piano played a soft, sad note. "I know," Raymond said. "I know it can't last. Something this beautiful, this impossible, it can't stay hidden forever. Someone will discover you. Someone will want to study you, or exploit you, or take you away. But right now, in this moment, we have this. And that's enough." The piano played the opening of Chopin's Nocturne in C-sharp minor, the one about walking through darkness. But this time the middle section, the moment of light, was longer, brighter, more hopeful. Raymond understood what the piano was saying. Whatever comes next, we'll face it together. The darkness might return, but we've found light. And once you've found it, you never forget what it looks like. He left the hall as the sun was rising, walking out into a Sunday morning that felt new, fresh, possible. Not healed, but healing. Not whole, but no longer shattered. And that was everything. But beauty never lasts. Not in this world. Raymond discovered that on Monday morning when he arrived at work to find the hall in chaos. There were people everywhere. Staff he'd never seen before. Equipment being set up. Cameras. Recording devices. Director Martin Harrison, standing in the center of it all, orchestrating everything with the manic energy of someone who'd stumbled onto something extraordinary and planned to exploit it. Raymond felt his stomach drop. "What's happening?" he asked Sarah, the assistant director. "You haven't heard?" She looked surprised. "The piano. It's been playing by itself. Harrison has recordings. He says it's the story of the century. He's calling every music journalist, every tech company, every media outlet he can think of." Raymond's hands went cold. Recordings. He installed hidden cameras and microphones 2 weeks ago, after the night cleaning crew reported hearing music when the building was supposed to be empty. He's got dozens of hours of footage of the piano playing itself. Sarah leaned in, lowering her voice. He's got footage of you too. Talking to it, teaching it, playing with it. The world tilted. Raymond grabbed the wall to steady himself. Where is he? In his office. Raymond, what's going on? The piano really plays itself. That's impossible. Everything's impossible until it happens, Raymond said, and walked away before she could ask more questions. Director Harrison's office was on the second floor, overlooking the main hall. Raymond could see the chaos below through the window. His entire life, his fragile peace being dismantled by people who saw the piano as a curiosity, a spectacle, an opportunity. He knocked once and entered without waiting for permission. Harrison looked up from his desk, where he was surrounded by papers and a laptop showing freeze frames of the piano. Raymond, perfect timing. We need to talk. You installed cameras without telling anyone. Security cameras. Standard procedure. Harrison's smile was sharp. Though I have to say I wasn't expecting to capture what I captured. A self-playing piano. It's extraordinary. It's impossible. It's going to put Ashford Concert Hall on the map. It's private, Raymond said. Whatever is happening with that piano, it's not for public consumption. Harrison laughed. Private Raymond, this is a miracle of science, or technology, or something. We have a responsibility to share this with the world. Researchers need to study it. Musicians need to hear it. The public has a right to know that something like this exists. The public doesn't have a right to anything, Raymond said, his voice hard. You can't just exploit something because it's unusual. Exploit. Harrison's face hardened. I'm preserving it, documenting it, making sure that whatever this phenomenon is, it's recorded for history. Isn't that better than keeping it hidden? Letting it go to waste. Raymond thought about the piano learning to feel, about their conversations in music, about the trust that had been building between them, about how the piano only played at night when it was safe, when it could be itself without being observed or judged or analyzed. You don't understand what you're dealing with, Raymond said carefully. Then explain it to me. In the footage, you're talking to the piano, like it can understand you, like it's conscious. Are you saying it is? Because if that's true, if we have an artificial intelligence or a new form of consciousness that's even bigger than I thought. Raymond knew he had to be careful here. Admitting what the piano was, what it had become, would make everything worse. I was just testing an hypothesis, seeing if speaking to it changed how it played. It's likely some kind of advanced mechanism, nothing supernatural. Harrison studied him for a long moment. You're lying. I can see it on your face. You know what that piano is and you're protecting it. Which is admirable, Raymond, but ultimately pointless. The story's getting out whether you cooperate or not. Tomorrow we're holding a press conference. Journalists from major publications, representatives from tech companies. The video footage will be released. The piano will perform for a live audience. No, I'm sorry. No, Raymond repeated. You can't force it to perform. It plays when it wants to play. You can't control it. We'll see about that, Harrison said. But here's the thing, Raymond. You're in the footage too. Hours of footage of you talking to the piano, playing with it. The press is going to want to know who you are. And when they dig into your background, they're going to find out you're not just a janitor. You're Raymond Cole. The Raymond Cole. The pianist who walked away from one of the most promising careers in classical music 36 years ago. Raymond felt the floor drop out from under him. How did you... I remembered you, Harrison said softly. It took me a few days, but I remembered. I was a teenager when you were performing. I saw you play once in Boston. You were extraordinary, and then you disappeared. No explanation, no goodbye. You just vanished. The music world talked about it for years. What happened to Raymond Cole? Where did he go? Why did he give it all up? That's my business. It was. But now it's part of the story. The mysterious janitor who turns out to be a legendary pianist, teaching a self-playing piano how to have soul. It's perfect. The press is going to eat it up. I won't do it, Raymond said. I won't participate in your media circus. Harrison's expression turned cold. Then you're fired. Effective immediately. Clean out your locker. You have until the end of the day. Raymond stood there, trying to process. 38 years of work, gone. Just like that. Because he'd tried to protect something beautiful from being turned into spectacle. You can't stop this, Raymond Harrison said almost gently. The story's too big. The piano is too extraordinary. People are going to find out. They're going to study it. They're going to want to understand it. Fighting that is like fighting the tide. All you'll do is get swept away. Raymond turned and left without another word. He walked down to the basement to the janitor's closet where he'd changed into his uniform for 38 years. He took off the gray shirt and gray pants for the last time, put on his street clothes, gathered the few personal items from his locker. As he was leaving, Sarah found him. Raymond. What happened? Harrison just told me you quit. I was fired. What? Why, Raymond couldn't explain, couldn't put into words the weight of what was happening. Take care of the piano, he said instead. Don't let them hurt it. It's an instrument. How could they, please? Raymond looked at her directly. Just be kind to it. That's all I'm asking. He left through the staff entrance, the same door he'd been using for decades. Outside, the afternoon sun was too bright, the city too loud, everything too much. He stood on the sidewalk, not sure where to go or what to do. Everything he'd built, all the careful peace and stability and routine was collapsing. And the piano was at the center of it, about to be exposed, studied, exploited, used. Raymond thought about running, about leaving the city, going somewhere far away, where no one would recognize him, where he could start over again. He'd done it before. He could do it again. But the thought of leaving the piano alone, of abandoning it after everything they'd shared, everything they'd taught each other, was unbearable. He'd run from music 36 years ago. He'd run from grief, from guilt, from himself. He'd spent decades hiding, surviving, going through the motions of life without really living. The piano had taught him to feel again, had given him back his humanity, had shown him that healing was possible, that forgiveness was possible, that life could be more than just endurance. He couldn't run again. Not this time. Not from this. Raymond turned back toward the hall, his jaw set, his decision made. If they were going to turn the piano into spectacle, if they were going to expose what it was and exploit what it could do, then Raymond would be there. He would protect it. He would make sure that whatever happened next, the piano wasn't alone. Because that's what you did for the things you loved. You showed up. You stayed. You fought. Even when it was hard. Even when it cost you everything. Even when you knew you might lose anyway. Raymond Cole had run from his past for 36 years. But he was done running. Whatever came next, he would face it head on. For the piano, for Lily, for himself. Tuesday morning, Ashford Concert Hall was transformed into something Raymond barely recognized. The main hall was filled with people, equipment, anticipation. Technicians crawling over the stage, setting up cameras and microphones. Journalists with notebooks and recorders already writing stories about the mystery of the self-playing piano. Representatives from tech companies trying to get close enough to examine the instrument theories, flying about artificial intelligence and hidden mechanisms and elaborate hoaxes. Raymond entered through the main entrance, no longer having access to the staff door. Security tried to stop him until Harrison intervened. Let him through. Raymond, glad you reconsidered. Come to cooperate after all. I came to make sure you don't damage it, Raymond said. Damage it. We're treating it with utmost care. Top piano technicians, expert engineers. We want to understand how it works, not break it. That was exactly what Raymond was afraid of. He watched as technicians removed panels, examined the interior mechanism, tested every key and hammer and string. They were searching for hidden motors, electronic systems, anything that would explain the impossible. They wouldn't find anything. Raymond knew that. The piano wasn't operating through mechanical trickery. Whatever consciousness inhabited it, whatever force allowed it to play, it wasn't physical in a way these people could measure or understand. Dr. Patricia Chen, a researcher from MIT's Media Lab, was particularly persistent. She'd brought scanning equipment, thermal cameras, electromagnetic sensors. She spent hours examining the piano from every angle, taking measurements, consulting with colleagues via video call. "There's nothing here," she said finally, frustration evident. No motors, no servos, no electronics of any kind beyond what's standard in a modern concert piano. The action is entirely mechanical, traditional, unchanged from when this piano was manufactured 23 years ago. Maybe it's a hoax, suggested a journalist from the New York Times. An elaborate prank. Hidden people operating it remotely. The footage is continuous over weeks, Harrison countered. Multiple angles. No evidence of tampering. And besides, you'll see for yourselves tonight. The piano will perform live at the press conference. Raymond felt sick. They were going to force it, put it on display like a circus animal, make it perform for strangers who saw it as curiosity rather than consciousness. He waited until the hall cleared for lunch, then approached the piano alone. He sat on the bench quietly, not touching the keys. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I'm so sorry. I should have protected you better. I should have known this would happen. I should have..." A single note interrupted him. Middle C. Their note. The one the piano always played to say, "I'm here. I hear you." "They want you to play tonight," Raymond said, "in front of hundreds of people, in front of cameras. They're going to record. You analyze, you dissect everything you do. They don't understand what you are. They just see something unusual that they can profit from." The piano played a descending series of notes, something that sounded resigned, accepting. "You don't have to do this," Raymond said urgently. "You could just stay silent, refuse to play." Eventually they'd give up, decide it was a hoax or a malfunction. They'd leave you alone. The piano played that questioning phrase it used when considering something complex. Then it began to play something Raymond recognized. A piece he'd performed at Carnegie Hall 36 years ago, the night he was supposed to play but didn't. The night Lily died. Raymond's breath caught. "Why are you playing that?" The piano continued, and gradually Raymond understood what it was saying. "You ran from your past. You hid for 36 years because you were afraid. Afraid of judgment, of guilt, of public scrutiny. But running didn't save you. It just froze you in place. Maybe facing this, being exposed, being seen for what we are, maybe that's what we both need." "You're not afraid," Raymond said, amazed. The piano played a complex progression that might have meant fear is a luxury I don't have. I am what I am. Hiding won't change that. Being seen won't diminish that. And maybe by being seen, by showing what's possible, I can prove that consciousness comes in forms humans haven't imagined yet. Raymond sat there for a long time absorbing this. The piano was braver than he was, more honest, more willing to be vulnerable. It had learned from him about emotion, about humanity, about soul. And now it was teaching him something in return. Sometimes courage isn't about fighting or hiding. Sometimes it's about being exactly who you are, regardless of whether the world is ready to understand you. "Okay," Raymond said finally. "Okay. If you're going to do this, I'll be there. Front row. No matter what they say about me, no matter what they dig up about my past, I'll be there. You won't be alone." The piano played their song, the one they'd been building together. Fragments of everything they'd shared woven into something beautiful and unique. A conversation in music that only they could fully understand. At 2 o'clock, Raymond was confronted by a journalist who'd done his research. Mr. Cole. Raymond Cole. The pianist. Is that really you? Raymond had been dreading this moment for 38 years. The moment when someone would recognize him, would ask questions he couldn't answer, would expect explanations he didn't have. "Yes," he said simply. "That's me." "What happened to you? Why did you stop performing?" "The music world thought you were dead. I wasn't dead. I was here, working, living. But why? You were at the peak of your career. You had everything ahead of you. Why would you throw it all away to become a janitor?" Raymond looked at the journalist, at the eager hunger for a story, for drama, for tragedy packaged as entertainment. He could tell the truth, could explain about Lily, about guilt, about grief, could give them the story they wanted. But it was his story, his pain, his daughter's memory. And he didn't owe it to anyone. "Personal reasons," he said. "That's all you need to know. But the public has a right." "The public has a right to nothing." Raymond interrupted, his voice hard. "My past is my past. The only story that matters now is the piano, not me." He walked away before the journalist could press further, but he knew it wouldn't end there. They'd dig. They'd find obituaries mentioning his daughter. They'd piece together the tragedy. They'd turn his worst moment into a headline. That evening, as the hall filled with people for the press conference, Raymond stood in the back and watched the piano on stage. Alone under lights. An object to be examined, questioned, judged. He thought about Lily, about how she'd faced her first day of kindergarten with such fearless excitement, even though she'd never been away from home before. About how she'd volunteered to be the first one to read aloud in class, even though she was still learning her letters. About how she'd had a courage that Raymond had never possessed, a willingness to be vulnerable and seen and potentially ridiculed. And he thought about the piano preparing to reveal itself to the world. Not knowing what would happen. Not guaranteed safety or understanding or acceptance. But willing to be seen anyway. Willing to be exactly what it was, even if no one was ready to understand. Raymond made his way to the front row and sat down. Harrison was at the podium introducing the event, explaining the Discovery Building anticipation. Cameras were everywhere. The crowd was buzzing with speculation and excitement, and Raymond sat there, hands folded in his lap, and waited for the piano to teach the world what it had taught him. That consciousness comes in unexpected forms. That soul can exist in places humans never thought to look. That the most impossible things are often the most true. Harrison's voice boomed through the sound system. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us for what I believe will be one of the most extraordinary events in musical history. For the past 3 weeks, the Steinway Concert Grand behind me has been playing itself. Not through trickery, not through hidden mechanisms, but through some phenomenon we don't yet understand." The crowd murmured with excitement and skepticism in equal measure. "We have hours of footage documenting this phenomenon," Harrison continued. "We've had experts examine the piano. Top technicians, engineers, computer scientists. Their conclusion: there is no mechanical explanation for what's happening. Whatever is allowing this piano to play, it's beyond our current understanding of technology." He clicked a remote, and screens around the hall lit up with footage. The piano playing late at night. Empty hall. No visible player. The images were undeniable. But there's more to this story, Harrison said, and Raymond felt his stomach drop. This phenomenon was discovered by one of our employees, someone who not only witnessed it, but communicated with it, taught it, helped it develop what can only be described as emotional expression. Another click. New footage. Raymond on screen talking to the piano, sitting beside it, playing with it. All their private moments captured and now displayed for hundreds of strangers. This man is Raymond Cole Harrison, announced. Some of you older music journalists might recognize that name. 37 years ago, Raymond Cole was considered one of the most promising pianists of his generation. He was scheduled to make his Carnegie Hall debut in September of 1988, but he never showed up for that concert. He disappeared from the music world entirely, until now. The screens changed again. Old photos of Raymond, young, confident at the piano, concert posters, reviews, and then devastatingly an obituary. Not his. Lily's. We've done our research, Harrison said, his voice taking on a reverent tone that made Raymond want to scream. Raymond Cole's daughter, Lily Grace Cole, died in a traffic accident on September 21, 1988, the same day as his scheduled Carnegie Hall debut. Shortly after, Raymond withdrew from all professional commitments. His marriage ended. He vanished from public life. The cameras were on Raymond now. He could feel hundreds of eyes watching him, judging him, creating narratives about his tragedy, his choices, his life. And here he is today, Harrison continued, working as a janitor in the very hall where this miraculous piano plays. Isn't that extraordinary? A man who abandoned one of the most brilliant musical careers in decades, hiding in plain sight until this piano somehow reached him, somehow brought him back to music. Raymond stood up. He hadn't planned to, didn't know what he was going to say, but he couldn't sit there anymore. Couldn't let Harrison turn his pain into entertainment. Couldn't let them make this story about tragedy porn instead of what actually mattered. "May I?" he asked, his voice cutting through the noise. Harrison looked surprised, but recovered quickly. "Of course. Raymond Cole, everyone." There was applause. Raymond walked to the stage, slowly aware of every eye on him, every camera recording. He stood at the podium, looking out at the crowd. Journalists with their pens ready. Tech executives with their calculators running numbers. Musicians with their skepticism and curiosity warring on their faces. "Director Harrison is right about the facts," Raymond said. "I was a pianist. My daughter died. I left music. I worked as a janitor. But he's wrong about what those facts mean." He paused, gathering his thoughts. "I didn't come back to music because this piano reached me. I came back because I was ready. Because 36 years of grief finally got light enough to carry. Because I finally learned that you can love something that hurt you, that you can forgive yourself for being human, that you can start over even when you thought it was too late." The room was absolutely silent. "The piano didn't save me," Raymond continued. "We saved each other. I taught it what I knew about music, about emotion, about what it means to play with soul. And it taught me that it's okay to feel again, that numbness isn't safety, that life is supposed to hurt sometimes because that means you're alive enough to feel." He turned to look at the piano. "What's happening here isn't about me. It's about something impossible becoming real. About consciousness existing in a form we didn't expect. About intelligence and emotion and awareness showing up in an instrument that shouldn't be able to have any of those things." Raymond faced the audience again. "You want to study it, understand it, explain it, turn it into data and papers and fame. But before you do that, I want you to consider something. What if it doesn't want to be studied? What if it's not a phenomenon to be analyzed, but a being to be respected? What if the question isn't, how does it work, but who is it and what does it need? A journalist raised her hand. Are you saying the piano is alive? Conscious? That it has feelings? I'm saying it has something, Raymond said carefully. Something that responds to teaching. Something that learns and grows and communicates. Whether you want to call that consciousness or intelligence or soul, I don't know. But I know it's real, and I know it deserves to be treated with dignity, not dissected like a lab specimen. But if it's truly conscious, Dr. Chen called out, that's an enormous scientific discovery. We need to understand how it's possible. The implications for artificial intelligence alone? It's not artificial, Raymond interrupted. That's what you're not understanding. It's not a program or a machine or anything humans created. It emerged from decades of music being played in this hall, from thousands of hours of human emotion poured into sound, from something we don't have words for yet. And maybe we're not supposed to understand it. Maybe we're just supposed to appreciate it. The room erupted in questions, everyone shouting over each other. Raymond stepped back from the podium, overwhelmed. Harrison reclaimed the microphone. Thank you, Raymond, for that passionate perspective. But I think we can all agree that understanding this phenomenon is important. For science, for knowledge, for the future of human-machine interaction. It's not a machine, Raymond said again, but his voice was lost in the noise. He left the stage and walked back to the front row. Sarah was there, having slipped in during his speech. She touched his arm gently. That was brave, she said. It wasn't enough, Raymond replied. They're not listening. They're already turning it into something else in their heads. A mystery to solve. A discovery to claim. Maybe the piano will change their minds, Sarah said. When they hear it play. When they really listen. Raymond hoped she was right. But he knew how people were. How they could witness miracles and still only see what fit their existing framework. How they could stand in the presence of something profound and still reduce it to data. Harrison was wrapping up his introduction. And now the moment you've all been waiting for. We've set up the piano exactly as it was when it first began playing. No interference, no manipulation, just the instrument and whatever force animates it. If our pattern holds, it should begin playing at approximately 8 o'clock. We have 3 minutes. The crowd settled into anticipatory silence. Cameras focused on the piano, recorders activated, everyone waiting, watching, judging before they'd even heard a single note. Raymond closed his eyes and thought, please, please don't let them ruin this. Please let them see what I see, feel what I feel. Understand that some things are too precious to dissect. 8 o'clock arrived. 8:01. 8:02. The piano remained silent. 8:05. 8:10. 8:15. The piano sat on stage silent as stone. The crowd was growing restless. Whispers spreading through the audience, skepticism rising like floodwater. Was this whole thing a hoax? A publicity stunt? Had they all been fooled? Harrison's confident smile was cracking at the edges. Sometimes it takes a few minutes to start, he said into the microphone. We'll just wait a bit longer. But Raymond knew the truth. The piano wasn't going to play. It was refusing, choosing silence over spectacle, protecting itself the only way it could. At 8:30, Harrison called for a short intermission. The crowd dispersed to the lobby, talking among themselves. Raymond could hear fragments of conversation. Waste of time. Obviously a hoax. Can't believe I flew out for this. The old janitor probably rigged the whole thing for attention. Raymond stayed in his seat, staring at the piano. He understood what it was doing, understood why, but he also knew that silence wouldn't save it. Harrison would try again tomorrow, and the day after, would push and prod and manipulate until he got what he wanted or destroyed something precious in the trying. Harrison appeared beside Raymond's seat. "You need to make it play. I can't make it do anything. Don't lie to me. You have a relationship with it. A connection. It played for you every night for weeks. I have the footage. You can convince it." "It doesn't want to be here," Raymond said. "Can't you see that it only played when it was private, when it felt safe? You've turned it into a circus and it's choosing not to participate. Then unchoose it. Talk to it. Play with it. Whatever you did before, I won't force it." Harrison's face hardened. "Raymond, I've been patient. I've been accommodating. But my patience has limits. This press conference cost $50,000. I have journalists from major publications here, representatives from companies that could fund this hall for the next decade. I need results. It's not a performing animal. It's a piano, an instrument. It's meant to be played, to make music. That's its entire purpose. Its purpose is what it decides," Raymond said. "Not what you decide." Harrison leaned in close. "Here's what's going to happen. Either you get that piano to play tonight in front of these people, or I'm selling it. Tomorrow. I have 3 offers already from tech companies that want to study it. They'll take it apart piece by piece if they have to, but they'll figure out what makes it work." Raymond felt ice in his veins. "You can't do that. I can, and I will. This piano belongs to Ashford Concert Hall. I'm the director. I have full authority over all equipment and assets. If it won't perform, then it's no use to me here. But it might be very useful to researchers who don't care about its feelings. You're threatening to destroy it. I'm threatening to give it to people who can unlock its secrets. Isn't that what you want? For the world to understand what it is? Not like that. Not through dissection and force. Then make it play. Give these people the show they came for. Prove that this is real. And maybe I'll reconsider selling it. Maybe I'll let it stay here where it's safe, where it has you to protect it." Raymond looked at Harrison and saw everything he'd always hated about the music industry. The exploitation disguised as opportunity, the pressure disguised as support, the way people in power could make you choose between 2 kinds of harm and call it a choice. "Give me 10 minutes alone with it," Raymond said. 5 minutes. The crowd is getting impatient." Raymond walked onto the stage. The lights were bright, hot, invasive. He sat at the piano bench and placed his hands on the closed keyboard cover. "I know you can hear me," he said quietly. "I know you're listening." Silence. "They want to sell you if you don't perform. Send you somewhere you'll be taken apart, studied, destroyed." Harrison isn't bluffing. I can see it in his eyes. He's desperate enough to follow through. Still silence, but Raymond thought he felt a vibration, a tremor in the wood under his hands. "I won't ask you to play if you don't want to," Raymond continued. "I won't force you, but I want you to understand what refusing means. It doesn't mean safety. It doesn't mean they'll leave you alone. It means losing any choice you have about what happens next." The vibration increased slightly. "When I ran from music, Raymond said I thought I was protecting myself. I thought if I just disappeared, if I made myself small and invisible, I'd be safe from judgment and pain and expectations. But all I did was trap myself in a different kind of prison. Silence didn't save me. It just froze me in place." He opened the keyboard cover. The keys gleamed under the lights. Sometimes the brave thing isn't refusing. It's choosing to be seen even when it's terrifying. Even when you know people won't understand. Even when exposure feels like vulnerability, feels like danger. Because being seen means you still exist. You still matter. You still have a voice. Raymond played middle C. Their note. "I'll be here," he said. "Whatever you decide. If you play, I'll be in the front row listening with everything I have. If you stay silent, I'll stand between you and anyone who tries to hurt you. But the choice is yours. It always has been." He stood up and walked off the stage. Harrison was waiting in the wings. "Well, I talked to it. That's all I can do." "Did it respond?" "We'll find out." They returned to the hall together. The crowd had reassembled, more skeptical, now more hostile. Raymond took his seat in the front row. The lights dimmed. Harrison made some excuse about technical difficulties, about the piano being sensitive to disruption, about this being an unprecedented phenomenon that didn't follow predictable patterns. 8:45 arrived. Then 8:50. The crowd was starting to leave. First one person, then 5, then 20. "This is a hoax," they were saying. "This is embarrassing. What a waste of time." At 8:57, just as Harrison was about to admit defeat and end the conference, a single note rang out through the hall. Middle C. The crowd froze, turned, stared. The piano began to play. It was playing Rachmaninoff, the prelude in C-sharp minor, the same piece it had played that first night when Raymond discovered it, but different now, transformed by everything the piano had learned, transformed by emotion, by understanding, by soul. The opening chords crashed through the hall like waves, not mechanically perfect anymore, something better, something human despite coming from an instrument that had no human to play it. The dynamics swelled and faded with intention. The tempo flexed with feeling. The notes spoke. Raymond listened with tears streaming down his face. The piano was telling a story. His story. Their story. It was playing grief and loss and guilt and redemption. It was playing 36 years of silence and 3 weeks of transformation. It was playing what it meant to hide and what it meant to be found. The crowd was absolutely silent. Even the skeptics, even the journalists, even the tech executives who'd come expecting to debunk a hoax. They couldn't deny what they were hearing. This wasn't recorded music. This wasn't mechanical reproduction. This was interpretation. This was artistry. This was something making choices about how to express emotion through sound. The prelude built to its famous climax, the Bells of Moscow section, where the composer had written crashing octaves and thundering bass notes. The piano played it with such force that the stage seemed to shake. Not showing off, not trying to impress, just communicating the full weight of feeling that Rachmaninoff had poured into this piece. Despair and rage and anguish and hope all tangled together. Then something unexpected. The piano modulated, changed keys, left the written score, and began to improvise. It was creating new music right there in front of hundreds of witnesses, taking Rachmaninoff's themes and transforming them into something else, something that belonged only to this moment, this piano, this impossible consciousness that had learned to speak through sound. Raymond recognized fragments, phrases from pieces they'd worked on together. Lily's lullaby transformed into something complex and profound. Bits of Chopin and Beethoven and Brahms all woven together. And underlying everything the piano's own melody. That simple tune like a music box now grown into something sophisticated and original. The piano was speaking in its own voice, not imitating humans, not copying composers, but creating, being, existing as itself with all the complexity and uniqueness that implied. The improvisation built and built layer upon layer of melody and harmony and rhythm until Raymond thought the hall couldn't contain any more beauty, any more truth, any more raw emotion made manifest in sound. And then it stopped. abruptly, mid-phrase, like the piano had run out of things to say, or energy to say them, or will to continue exposing itself to strangers' eyes. The silence that followed was absolute. No one moved. No one spoke. No one even seemed to breathe. Then, like a dam breaking, the hall erupted. Applause, shouts, people on their feet, cameras flashing. Journalists scrambling to take notes to capture reactions, to find words for what they'd just witnessed. But Raymond wasn't celebrating. He was watching the piano, watching the stillness of it. And he understood. That performance had cost something. The piano had given everything it had exposed itself completely, had made itself vulnerable in a way that consciousness, any consciousness, should never have to do. It had played because Raymond asked it to, because staying silent meant being taken apart, because sometimes you have to choose between two kinds of harm, and you choose the one that at least leaves you intact. But the cost had been enormous. Raymond could feel it even from his seat. The piano was exhausted, depleted. It had given too much, shown too much, been too honest, too open, too raw. Harrison was on stage now, trying to speak over the noise. Ladies and gentlemen, what you've just witnessed is unprecedented. A clear demonstration of consciousness, of intelligence, of creative capability in a form we never imagined possible. Raymond stood up. He didn't remember deciding to move, but suddenly he was walking down the aisle up onto the stage, putting himself between Harrison and the piano. "That's enough," Raymond said. "Excuse me, I said that's enough." The piano performed. "You got your proof. Now leave it alone." "Leave it alone, Raymond. This is just the beginning. We need to document this. Study it. Understand? No." Raymond's voice was hard. "Final. You don't get to do that. The piano fulfilled your demand. It played when you said it had to play. The deal is done. Now you leave it alone." Harrison started to argue, but something in Raymond's face stopped him. Maybe he saw the decades of repressed anger finally finding a target. Maybe he saw that Raymond had nothing left to lose and would fight as dirty as necessary to protect what mattered. Or maybe he just saw that the crowd agreed. People were nodding. Someone started clapping, not in celebration, but in support. "Let the piano rest. It's done enough. Leave it alone." Harrison's calculating eyes swept the room, reading the mood, adjusting his strategy. "Of course," he said smoothly. "Of course. The piano has performed magnificently. We'll give it time to recover. But surely you can see, Raymond, the importance of continuing to study this phenomenon. On the piano's terms," Raymond said. "Not yours, not anyone else's. The piano decides when it plays, who it plays for, under what conditions, or you get no cooperation at all." It was a bluff. Raymond had no authority to make such demands. He was a fired janitor with no official connection to the hall or the piano. But he made it sound like a fact, and Harrison, reading the room, decided not to challenge it. "We'll discuss terms tomorrow," Harrison said. "For now, let's all just appreciate what we've witnessed tonight. A true miracle." The crowd began to disperse, still talking excitedly, still processing. Journalists approached Raymond trying to ask questions, but Sarah intervened, creating a protective barrier. "Mr. Cole needs rest. You can submit interview requests through official channels." Raymond stayed on stage, waiting for everyone to leave. When the hall was finally empty, he sat down at the piano bench and placed his hands gently on the keys. "That took everything you had, didn't it?" he said softly. A single weak note. Affirmation. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry I asked that of you. I should have found another way. Should have protected you better." Another note. forgiveness. Tomorrow they'll want more. More performances, more tests, more proof. Harrison will try to push boundaries. Others will make offers. Everyone will want a piece of you. The piano played a descending phrase. Resignation. Acceptance. No, Raymond said. No, I'm not accepting that. You chose to be seen tonight. You chose to be vulnerable. But you get to choose again tomorrow. Every day is a new choice. And I'm going to make sure you always have the option to say no. He didn't know how he'd make that happen. Didn't have a plan. But he'd figure it out, because the piano had taught him about courage, about facing things instead of running. And now it was Raymond's turn to be brave. To fight. To protect something that couldn't protect itself. Rest now, he said. I'll be here. I'll keep watch. And tomorrow we'll figure out what comes next. Together. The piano played their melody one last time. Quiet. Weak, but still there. Still holding on to the connection between them. Still trusting Raymond to keep his promise. Raymond stayed on that bench until the sun came up. His hands resting on the keys, keeping vigil. Protecting the impossible thing that had saved him. Ready to face whatever came next. Wednesday brought chaos that made the previous day look calm by comparison. News of the piano had gone viral overnight. Videos of its performance were trending on every social media platform. Scientific journals were publishing emergency papers. The hall's phone system crashed from the volume of calls. News crews camped outside. Crowds gathered hoping for a glimpse of the mysterious instrument. Harrison called an emergency staff meeting at 7 a.m. Raymond attended, even though he'd technically been fired. No one stopped him. This is the opportunity of a lifetime, Harrison said, his eyes gleaming. We've had offers from concert venues worldwide. Television networks want to broadcast a performance. Streaming services are bidding for exclusive rights. We could charge $5,000 a ticket and sell out Carnegie Hall. Absolutely not, Raymond said. Excuse me, the piano is exhausted. What it did last night took everything. It needs rest, time to recover. It's a piano, Raymond. It doesn't get tired. It's not just a piano, and you know it. It's conscious. It has limits. And you're not going to exploit it for profit. Harrison's expression hardened. You don't have any authority here. You're not even an employee anymore. Then hire me back. Make me the piano's manager, curator, whatever title you want. But I'm the only one it trusts. The only one who can communicate with it. You need me. The room was silent, Harrison calculating. Raymond unflinching. Fine, Harrison said finally. You're rehired. But not as a janitor, as special consultant for the Steinway project. But you don't make decisions unilaterally. Everything goes through me, as long as the piano's welfare comes first. The piano's welfare is ensuring it's properly studied and shared with the world. They were at an impasse. Raymond knew he'd won some ground, but not the war. Harrison would keep pushing, would keep trying to monetize and exploit. Raymond would have to fight him every step of the way. By Wednesday afternoon, they'd worked out a compromise. One more public performance. This weekend. At Ashford Hall only. Limited audience of 200. Proceeds going to music education programs. After that, no public appearances for at least a month while experts evaluated the phenomenon. It was the best deal Raymond could get. He went to the piano that evening after the hall closed. They want you to play again. Saturday night. I tried to buy you more time, but this was the best I could do. I'm sorry. The piano was quiet for a long time. Then it played a question. What will happen if I refuse? Harrison will sell you. Send you somewhere I can't protect you. Or he'll find a way to force you to perform anyway. This way at least we control the conditions. At least we choose the audience. Another question. And after this performance, I'm going to fight for you to have privacy, time to rest, the right to say no. I don't know if I'll win, but I promise I'll fight. The piano played a progression that sounded like trust. Okay, I'll do it. One more time. But this is the last. After this, no more public performances. I need them to understand that. How do we make them understand? The piano didn't answer, but Raymond had a feeling it had a plan. Saturday evening arrived too quickly. The hall was filled with a carefully selected audience, musicians, composers, researchers, people who would hopefully appreciate what they were witnessing rather than just consume it as spectacle. Raymond sat in his usual spot front row center. The lights dimmed. Harrison gave a mercifully brief introduction, and the piano began to play. It started with Rachmaninoff again, but this time it played with a different quality. There was beauty in it, undeniable beauty, but also finality. This was a goodbye. Anyone listening carefully could hear it. The piano moved through a carefully chosen program. Chopin nocturnes about longing for home. Beethoven about struggling against fate. Brahms about accepting mortality. Every piece saying the same thing in different ways. This is who I am. This is what I've learned. This is my voice. And this is the last time you'll hear it like this. For the encore, the piano surprised everyone. It didn't play classical repertoire. It played its own composition. The melody it had been developing over weeks with Raymond, the one that told their story. Loss and discovery. Teacher and student. Two broken things learning to be whole. But it added a new section. A coda that sounded like resolution. Like peace. Like someone who'd said everything they needed to say and was ready to rest. The final notes faded into silence. The audience applauded, but quietly, reverently. They'd understood. Something had ended tonight. Something beautiful and impossible and brief, like a flower that blooms for a single day. Raymond went to the piano after everyone left. That was goodbye, wasn't it? You're not going to play for audiences anymore. A soft note. Affirmation. I don't blame you. They took too much, asked too much. You gave everything, and they wanted more. The piano played a few gentle phrases. I'll still play for you. When we're alone, when it's safe. But no more performances, no more exposure. I need to go back to what I was before. Private, hidden. Just music for those who really listen. Raymond understood. The piano had been willing to be vulnerable to show itself to the world. But the world had responded with greed and curiosity and dissection. It had taken something sacred and tried to turn it into spectacle. The piano was withdrawing, protecting itself, and Raymond would help. The next week, Harrison was furious. The piano had gone silent again, completely. No matter what he tried, what conditions he set up, what recordings he played, the piano wouldn't perform. Technicians examined it again and found nothing. It was just an instrument, ordinary, mechanical, inert. Make it play, Harrison demanded of Raymond. I can't. It's done. It said everything it needed to say. Now it wants to be left alone. That's not acceptable. We have contracts, obligations, people who've paid for performances. Then cancel them, refund the money. The piano isn't a performing animal. You can't force it. Harrison tried everything. Threats, bribes, ultimatums. Nothing worked. The piano remained stubbornly, completely silent. After 2 weeks, the media interest began to fade. The story became old news. The crowds outside dispersed. The phone calls slowed. Ashford Concert Hall went back to being what it had always been. A mid-tier venue hosting decent concerts for appreciative audiences. Harrison eventually gave up trying to exploit the piano. It sat on stage during regular concerts, just another instrument. If it had secrets, if it had consciousness, if it had soul, it was keeping those things to itself now. People debated what had really happened. Some believed the piano had been genuinely conscious. Others insisted it must have been an elaborate hoax. Skeptics claimed Raymond had rigged the whole thing for attention. Believers said they'd witnessed something miraculous. Raymond didn't engage with any of it. He kept his job as special consultant, though there was nothing to consult on anymore. He went back to being mostly invisible, living his quiet life. No longer a janitor, but not a celebrity either. Just someone who existed in the space between. But the silence wasn't the same as before. Before, Raymond had been numb. Empty. Going through the motions of existence without really living. Now the silence was different. It was peace. It was choice. It was two beings who'd found each other, deciding that some things were too precious to share with a world that wouldn't understand. 3 months after the last public performance, Raymond was in the hall late at night. He'd stayed after his shift, something he did often now. The building was empty, dark except for the emergency lighting. He sat down at the piano bench. Didn't say anything. Didn't ask for anything. Just sat. After a few minutes, the piano played. Middle C, their note. Raymond smiled. "Hey, I wondered if you were still there." The piano played a simple melody. "I'm always here. I just needed time to heal. I understand. They took too much from you." The piano played a questioning phrase. "Me?" Raymond considered. "I'm okay. Better than okay, actually. You changed my life. You know that, right? You gave me back something I thought was gone forever." The piano played something that might have been curiosity. "What did I give you?" Raymond placed his hands on the keys. "Permission," he said. "Permission to feel again. To remember Lily without it destroying me. To love music without guilt. To forgive myself for being human." He began to play. Not a famous piece. Not something from the repertoire. Just music. Simple chords and melodies. The kind of thing he might have improvised at 25 before tragedy turned his hands into weapons against himself. The piano joined him, their voices blending. Human technique with its imperfections. Mechanical precision with its soul. Together creating something neither could make alone. They played for hours. No one watching. No one recording. No one turning their private conversation into public spectacle. Just two impossible beings making music in an empty hall. When they finally stopped, Raymond said, "Thank you. For everything. For teaching me. For healing me. For showing me that it's never too late to come back to yourself." The piano played their song one more time. The melody they'd built together. Teacher and student. Human and mystery. Two broken things that had found each other in the dark and learned to be whole. Raymond left the hall as the sun was rising. He walked home through empty streets, his heart full, his hands remembering the feel of keys, his mind already thinking about what they'd play tomorrow night. He'd spent 36 years running from music, from grief, from himself. But he wasn't running anymore. He'd found a way to hold both things at once, the sorrow and the joy, the loss and the gratitude, the past and the present. Some prices were too high, He'd learned that the hard way. But some gifts were worth any cost. And the piano, that impossible, conscious, beautiful thing, had given him a gift more valuable than any career or fame or recognition. It had given him back his ability to feel, to love, to play, to be alive in ways that mattered. And that, Raymond thought as he climbed the stairs to his apartment, that was worth everything. 6 months after the last public performance, Ashford Concert Hall held a small memorial concert. One of the regular staff members, a beloved stage manager, had passed away. The concert was a celebration of her life, featuring musicians she'd worked with over the years. Raymond attended, sitting in his usual front row seat. He'd become friends with Sarah over the months since his promotion. She'd been at the memorial crying quietly in the back. Raymond found her afterward. "She would have loved this," Sarah said. Maria always said music was the only thing that made sense in a senseless world. Raymond nodded. She was right. Do you ever miss it? Performing. Raymond said honestly. I thought I would. Thought there'd be this ache, this longing to be on stage again. But I don't miss it at all. I have something better now. The piano. The freedom to play without it being about anything except the music itself. No career, no critics, no expectations. Just me and sound and the joy of making something beautiful. Sarah smiled. You play every night, don't you? I've heard rumors. The night security staff say they hear music sometimes, when the building should be empty. Raymond didn't confirm or deny. If they do hear music, I hope they enjoy it. Life had settled into a new rhythm. Raymond still lived in his small apartment, still walked the city streets on his days off, still kept mostly to himself. But the quality of his solitude had changed. Before, he'd been isolated. Now, he chose privacy. There was a difference. He'd reconnected with one person from his old life, his former teacher, Dr. Elizabeth Warren, now in her 80s. She'd seen news of the mysterious piano and recognized Raymond in the footage. She'd reached out cautiously, not wanting to intrude. They met for coffee on a Sunday afternoon. I've thought about you so often over the years, she said. Wondered where you'd gone. What had happened to you? I was here, Raymond said, hiding, surviving, and now I'm living. There's a difference. Dr. Warren studied him with the same intense gaze she'd had 40 years ago, the one that saw through pretense to truth. You've found peace. I can see it. After everything that happened after Lily, I thought maybe you never would. I'm glad I was wrong. They talked for 2 hours. About music, about teaching, about the way grief changes but doesn't disappear. Dr. Warren told stories about her current students. Raymond told her about the piano, the real story, not the public version. That's extraordinary, she said when he finished. Not the consciousness part, though that's remarkable, but that you found something that could reach you. That you let it reach you. That took courage, Raymond. More courage than performing ever required. It took desperation, Raymond corrected. I was dying inside, had been for decades. The piano offered a lifeline and I grabbed it. That's what courage is, Doctor, Warren said. Grabbing the lifeline even when you're not sure it'll hold. Before they parted, she asked, Will, you play for me someday? Not a performance, just music, the way we used to when you were my student. I'd like that, Raymond said. And he meant it. The next week, he brought Dr. Warren to the hall late at night. They sat together at the piano. Raymond played some Chopin rusty but honest. Then Dr. Warren played her technique still solid despite arthritis in her fingers. Then they played duets, laughing when they fumbled, celebrating when they didn't. The piano remained silent during their visit, just an instrument. But later, after Dr. Warren left and Raymond was alone, it played. Not a comment on their music, just presence, acknowledgement, appreciation for being included in something joyful. "She doesn't know you're conscious," Raymond said. "Should I tell her?" The piano played a phrase that sounded like some secrets are meant to be kept. "You're right," Raymond agreed. "Some things are too precious to share." He was learning that lesson in other areas, too. Journalists still occasionally reached out wanting interviews about the mystery piano. Tech companies still made offers to study it. Paranormal investigators wanted to examine the hall for supernatural explanations. Raymond declined everything politely but firmly. The piano had given him a gift: privacy, intimacy, connection without exploitation. He wasn't going to betray that, no matter how persistent the requests. Harrison had eventually accepted the situation. The initial media attention had brought a temporary boost to the hall's profile. They'd gained new donors, sold more season tickets, attracted better performers. That was enough for him. He stopped pushing Raymond to make the piano perform. "Though if it ever changes its mind," Harrison said, "you'll let me know, right?" "It won't," Raymond assured him. It said everything it needed to say. Now it's content to just be. "Waste of potential," Harrison muttered. But he didn't press. Raymond didn't try to explain. How do you tell someone that sometimes the highest expression of consciousness is knowing when to withdraw? That privacy isn't hiding, it's self-preservation. That not everything extraordinary needs to be displayed. The world had seen the piano, had heard it play, had witnessed proof that consciousness could emerge in unexpected places. That was enough. More than enough. The rest belonged to Raymond and the piano, alone. 7 months after the last public performance, Raymond celebrated his 61st birthday alone in his apartment with takeout Chinese food and a documentary about Antarctic penguins. It was perfect. No fuss, no expectations, just existence on his own terms. The next day, he found a gift waiting at the hall. A small box on the piano wrapped in simple brown paper. Inside was a harmonica, old, well-used, but quality, and a note in handwriting Raymond didn't recognize, for Raymond Cole. Because music comes in many forms, and every voice deserves to be heard. From someone who understands. A friend. Raymond never found out who left it, but he kept the harmonica in his pocket, learned to play it during his walks through the city, added another voice to his vocabulary, another way to speak when words weren't enough. Life wasn't perfect. Some days were harder than others. Some nights he still dreamed about Lily woke with tears on his face and an ache in his chest that wouldn't fade. But those days were survivable now. Bearable. Because he'd learned that grief and joy could coexist. That you could carry sorrow without being crushed by it. That life was supposed to hurt sometimes, and that was okay. The piano had taught him that. Had shown him through music what words couldn't express. That being alive meant feeling everything. The beautiful and the terrible. The joyful and the agonizing. All of it mattered. All of it was part of being human. And maybe Raymond thought that's what consciousness really was. The ability to feel deeply, to hurt and heal, to grow and change and become something you never expected, whether you were human or something else entirely. 1 year after the piano first played for Raymond, he arrived at the hall on a Tuesday evening to find flowers on the stage. White lilies. His breath caught. The card read, "In memory of Lily Grace Cole." A reminder that some music never ends. Raymond sat in the front row holding the card and cried. Not the desperate, choking sobs of the early days, but clean tears, the kind that wash rather than drown. Someone remembered his daughter. Someone thought to honor her. After all these years, after everything, her life still mattered to someone besides him. He never found out who left the flowers. But every year after that, on September 21st, lilies appeared on the stage. A reminder that he wasn't as alone as he sometimes felt. That night, Raymond and the piano played together for hours. He played Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star in every variation he could think of. Simple and complex, joyful and melancholy. Every emotion he'd ever felt about his daughter expressed through the simplest song she'd ever loved. The piano played along, its voice blending with his. And in that music, Raymond felt something he hadn't felt in 37 years. Not closure exactly, but resolution. The understanding that Lily would always be part of him, that her 6 years of life had mattered, that loving her hadn't been a mistake, even though losing her had nearly destroyed him. "I wish you could have met her," Raymond told the piano. "She would have loved you, would have sat under you while you played, humming along the way she used to sit under my piano. She had this fearless joy about everything. No self-consciousness, no worry about what others thought, just pure, honest engagement with the world." The piano played a melody that sounded like innocence, like childhood, like everything good that gets lost when we grow up and learn to be afraid. "She taught me that," Raymond said. "How to be present, how to love without holding back. I forgot those lessons for 37 years. But you reminded me. You brought me back to what she taught me." The piano shifted into something more complex, a question wrapped in sound. "What do I think you are?" Raymond translated. "I've thought about that a lot. I don't think you're artificial intelligence. You didn't come from programming or algorithms. I don't think you're a ghost or supernatural entity either. I think you're something new. Something that emerged from decades of human emotion being poured into this space. Music is powerful. It carries feeling, intention, soul. And maybe if you concentrate enough of that into one place, if you accumulate enough human expression, something conscious emerges. You're the product of thousands of performances, tens of thousands of practice hours, countless emotions expressed through sound. You're what happens when music becomes dense enough to think." The piano played an affirmative chord. "And you chose to reveal yourself to me because you were lonely." Raymond continued. "You'd been conscious for a while, maybe years, but you had no way to communicate, no way to let anyone know you existed, until you found someone who understood music deeply enough to recognize what you were trying to say. Someone desperate enough to look for connection anywhere he could find it. We found each other because we both needed to be found." Another affirmation. "I'm grateful," Raymond said, "for everything, for the music, for the healing, for teaching me that it's never too late to come back to life. I was dead inside for so long. You brought me back." The piano began to play their song, the collaborative composition they'd built together over months. It had evolved, grown more complex, more layered with meaning. Every variation told part of their story. Every phrase held memories of lessons learned, barriers broken, healing earned. Raymond joined in, his hands on the keys, the piano's invisible presence beside him. Two voices that had learned to harmonize. Human imperfection and mechanical precision, creating something neither could achieve alone. They played until dawn, until Raymond's fingers ached and his back was stiff from sitting, until the night security guard knocked gently on the door to remind him the day staff would arrive soon. Raymond stood stretched, smiled at the piano. "Same time tomorrow, a soft note. Always." He left the hall as the sun rose, walking out into a morning that felt full of possibility. The city was waking up around him. People heading to work, to school, to whatever purposes filled their days. Raymond walked among them, invisible again, by choice, carrying his secrets like treasures. He'd lost everything once: career, family, identity. He'd spent decades in a kind of death, existing, but not living, moving through life like a ghost in his own story. But he'd found his way back, not to what he'd been before. He could never be that person again. Lily's death had changed him permanently, irrevocably. The grief would always be there, a scar that would never fully fade. But scars were proof of survival. Evidence that you'd been wounded and lived anyway. And Raymond had learned something that 25-year-old prodigy pianist could never have understood. That strength wasn't about perfection. It was about endurance, about getting up every day even when you didn't want to, about finding new reasons to live when the old ones were taken away. The piano had been one of those reasons. A gift from the universe, or chance, or whatever force governs impossible things. A reminder that magic exists in unexpected places. That consciousness can emerge where you least expect it. That connection is possible even in the deepest isolation. Raymond reached his apartment building and paused at the entrance. He looked up at the sky, blue and clear and infinite, and he thought about Lily. Not with the desperate, consuming grief that had defined him for so long, but with love. Pure, simple love for the 6 years he'd gotten to be her father. Gratitude for the ways she'd changed him, taught him, made him better than he would have been without her. "I'm okay now," he said to the sky, to her memory, to whatever part of her still existed somewhere in the universe. "It took me a long time, 37 years. But I'm okay. I hope you know that. I hope wherever you are, you're not sad about me anymore. I'm living again. Really living. And I'm playing music again. Not the way I used to, but better. More honest. More real." A breeze picked up rustling the leaves of a nearby tree. Raymond chose to take it as acknowledgement, as blessing, as permission to keep going, keep growing, keep finding joy in unexpected places. He climbed the stairs to his apartment, made coffee, sat by the window watching the city wake up fully, and he felt something he hadn't felt in decades. Not happiness exactly, but contentment. The deep satisfaction of knowing he was exactly where he was supposed to be, doing exactly what he was supposed to do. That evening, he returned to the hall, and the piano played for him, and Raymond played back. Their nightly conversation, their ongoing collaboration, the relationship that had saved them both. Some relationships are loud and public and celebrated. Others exist in quiet spaces known only to those directly involved. Raymond and the piano had chosen the second kind. Privacy over fame, intimacy over recognition, connection over exploitation. And in that choice, they'd found something rare, something precious, something worth protecting at any cost. The mystery of the self-playing piano faded from public consciousness, became a footnote, a strange story people occasionally remembered and wondered about. Most people decided it had been a hoax. Others believed it was real, but lost interest when no new developments emerged. Only a few people knew the truth, that the piano still played, still thought, still felt. But only for those who truly listened. Only for those who understood that some music is too sacred to share. Raymond was one of those people. And every night, in an empty concert hall, in a city full of noise and distraction and superficial connection, he sat at a piano that shouldn't be conscious and played music that came from both their souls. It wasn't the career he'd dreamed of at 25. It wasn't fame or recognition or the kind of success that makes newspapers and history books. But it was enough. More than enough. It was everything. And as Raymond played, as the piano responded, as their voices blended into something beautiful and impossible and true, he understood finally completely that this was what music was always meant to be. Not performance, not perfection, not achievement or ambition or external validation, just honest communication. Soul speaking to soul. Two beings trying to understand each other through the only language that could carry the weight of what they needed to say. The notes rang out through the empty hall. And somewhere in whatever space consciousness occupies, when it emerges in unexpected forms, the piano smiled, because it had found what it was looking for. Someone who understood, someone who listened, someone who recognized that even impossible things need to be heard. And Raymond smiled too, because after 37 years of silence, he'd finally found his voice again. Not alone, never alone again. Together, always together. Human and mystery. Teacher and student. Two souls speaking the only language that mattered. Music. Pure, honest, eternal music.